Yes.
We're here with John Dahl, Vice President, ESPN Films and Original Content. John and I go way back. We have a common connection. My best friend at the Chicago Tribune was a reporter named Reed Hanley, sports reporter, longtime sports reporter. Reed is your cousin.
Yeah.
And Reed was a great guy. Unfortunately, passed away in 2010, but we still remember him very fondly. And Reed was one of the reasons why you went into the business, wasn't it?
Absolutely. He was the one person in the family who understood my passion for sports media, and I, had a model to follow, and that was Reed.
And Reed the path led you to ESPN, and you were producing, and then eventually this unbelievable project that was supposed to be a one-year thing, and now is kind of a staple of ESPN, the 30 for 30 and the original films. When it originally started, what was the thought as far as, what we're going to do with these films?
Well, the thought was to do something different than what we had done, say, with ESPN 25, where we looked at the era, the first 25 years of the ESPN era, but did all kinds of different sort of shows in-house. This time, what the conceit was, Bill Simmons and Connor Shell initially developed it, which was be 30 films, and it would all be outside filmmakers, independent filmmakers, and kind of the notion being it's our gift to our audience, the fans, to have these people who are passionate about a particular subject or story that want to tell it in a certain way, and that we would provide a platform for that. So that was the initial intent, to do 30 stories from the last 30 years in sports, or the first 30 years of the ESPN era, which would be 1979 to 2009 at that time, directed by 30 different people. Okay, so 30 stories, 30 different directors, 30 years of sports in terms of the period that we were covering. And the notion beyond that was specific stories that touched larger themes.
And obviously it was such a great success that it became more than a 30 for 30, and now you're probably 30 for 60 or whatever. But I'm curious, there's a couple things. Why did you have so much talent in this building, or in this men's campus? Why the idea of getting outside directors and producers to do this?
To get different viewpoints and to portray it, convey it, present it as something that's not just what ESPN is saying about these different stories, but what these filmmakers want to say about these particular stories. So when you reach out to Barry Levinson,
right,
and you look at his tremendous accomplishments as a director, and he's passionate about the Baltimore Colts. He's from Baltimore, grew up a Baltimore Colts fan, and then the Colts left in the middle of the night, 1984, and Barry wanted to tell that story that was personal to him, about how the marching band kept on marching after the Colts left, and marched and led the push to get NFL football back in Baltimore, which happened about a dozen years later. So that kind of perspective is priceless to have.
And that was one of the first films. I mean,
it was the second film we ever did. Was Barry Levinson telling the story of the Colts marching band when the. Yeah.
I mean, that was an incredible. And you've had other ones. To name some of the other directors who've been involved in this. I know you had. I'm thinking of Kevin Connolly from Entourage, doing that New York Islanders, the wacky story, the unbelievable story of the New York Islanders.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an incredible film.
Yeah, again, that story too, John Spano, who wanted to buy the Islanders and essentially didn't have the money to buy it. Right. And it was basically a con.
Right.
And it had a real entourage quality to the whole story, just the kind of character that Spano was and is. And it was a good fit. Kevin, as a director, really clicked with John Spano, and Spano kind of reacted to Kevin as the director. And so Kevin brought that vibe to the way the story was told. Plus, Kevin, it was personal to him, it being a Long Island story. So it was just, again, a natural fit to tell it that way.
Yeah, and I think obviously you've had so many other, and you've had now repeat guys. I mean, people wanting to do multiple 30 for 30s, which really kind of says how passionate these guys, are about these projects, because they're very busy people and very much in demand.
Yeah.
And they want to come back and do it again.
Yeah, and that's been great. And people like Jonathan Haack or Billy Corbin, really super talented directors that want to come back and tell another story that's personal to them. I mean, for Billy, it was, you know, he had done that documentary Cocaine Cowboys that was such a rousing success. And Billy is particularly adept at the Miami story,
right?
And the
University, the U, which is
if
you guys, if you haven't seen that one, the two of them are unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, the U about the University of Miami football in the 80s and 90s, and just an amazing story.
Yeah, and he really explored the edge to the U, what made the U go, and it was our first actual sequel. We ended up doing the U Part 2 a couple of years ago. And yet it had an edge to it. It wasn't something that the university at the time was even embracing or cooperating with Billy. And Billy is a University of Miami graduate. So it says a lot about what he brought to that story. But again, here with this type of story he wanted to tell, he told it through people who had played for the U, coached at the U, or covered the U. He told it within the U, which I think was a little bit different than what we're typically used to seeing, where you tell a story, make sure you get this side, make sure you get that side. He was saying, look, this is how they saw the world. And you can have the critics, the people who didn't like the U or were critical of the U, in archive material. And that's the way Billy approached it. So again, it's a different approach. And I think that's been a key to 30 for 30. It doesn't have like a formula to how the stories are told. There's a freshness to it. There's a diverse range of filmmakers, men and women, all kinds of backgrounds, culturally and otherwise, different sports, different years. And that keeps it fresh so that it doesn't fall into something that just you kind of know what you're getting, you know, film after film. We want there to be an element of surprise from
Well, and that leads to my next question. We've talked about this several times. You guys are not looking for necessarily the biggest stories in sports. I mean, the stories, you know, the Michael Jordan or Cal Ripken, you know, the streak, or, I mean, the stories that when you're selecting these stories, a lot, you know, sometimes they're, yes, I remember that story, but there's other ones that you go, wow, I didn't even think of it. The one that comes to mind for me was the film that you did on Marcus Dupree.
Yeah.
Okay, so people who don't know, Marcus Dupree was an unbelievable running back for Oklahoma. He had an unbelievable freshman year. I think he ran for 300 yards in the Fiesta Bowl, but he kind of flamed out really quickly for various reasons. It's a great film that you guys should watch. I mean, that was, you know, it was very much a shooting star type guy. Why did you guys go with a film like that? With
that story can touch the larger theme of the recruit that everybody wants, and it doesn't always work out the way everybody thinks it will work out. And it's also it merged a civil rights story where he was from, Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the Mississippi Burning film basically was based with the murder of the 3 civil rights workers in 1964. So it was a story that cut through beyond just sports into something much deeper. And you think about why Marcus Dupree. Well, there was actually a book written about the recruitment of Marcus Dupree.
Right. It was huge. I mean, I can't tell you how big this guy was.
Yeah, and it gives you a sense of that. And then on top of it, what Jonathan Hogg and his team did such a good job was finding somebody in Philadelphia, Mississippi, who actually had high school film footage that had never been seen of Marcus. And being able to bring that to the audience and actually bring it to Marcus, for Marcus to be able to see that film on screen for the first time. That was part of the film, him watching himself when he was in his glory.
Right.
It just adds an emotional element, a poignant element to the story. So we were embracing early on this notion that, remember we had a discussion very in the early stages of planning 30 for 30, which was, do we need to tell a Michael Jordan story? Do we need to tell a Tiger Woods story? Do we need to tell a Mike Tyson story? And we concluded that we did not. That we were going to be story-driven, not topic-driven or subject-driven.
The Michael Jordan story that you guys have told up to this point, and when we're talking today, with nothing to do with basketball. It was about him playing baseball for 1 year with the White Sox in the minor league system.
That is a classic 30 for 30 film. It's been a very successful film
Ron Shelton?
for us. Ron Shelton directed it, and it's classic 30 for 30 in that when everybody maybe is looking here, we were looking over here. And to tell the story of Jordan, to understand Jordan through this 1 year of baseball, you can understand some maybe deeper things about what makes Michael Jordan tick and how he reacted to the murder of his father. And so that was the kind of story we were looking for, like with Mike Tyson, the story we told through One Night in Vegas when Tupac Shakur was killed after the fight. And the merger, so to speak, of Mike Tyson and Tupac Shakur on this one night in Las Vegas as he was, early in his comeback when he was released from prison. Again, a very specific story that's a window into the larger Mike Tyson story. We've never done a Tiger Woods 30 for 30. Not one.
Do you think you will?
Maybe. One day, if we find the story that we think is worth telling.
But it has to be a story. It's not like you're going to tell the story. It's not going to be like a documentary type story of his life. It's going to be, I mean, you would typically take a slice of his life and maybe
a specific story in Tiger's life. That, you know, right now Tiger, his career is still going, even though he's been hurt. He's out, you know, again this year. But I think time and distance really benefits filmmaking tremendously. That ability to step back and see how things play out. I mean, look at the O.J. Simpson Made in America 5-part film event. Ezra Edelman
unbelievable,
did an absolutely brilliant, superb job of directing and producing that film. And think about what the O.J. story would have looked like maybe 15 years ago and what it looked like the way Ezra presented it. That ability to step back and see how his life played out, to really assess the backdrop of police relations in Los Angeles, the history of it, the history of race relations in Los Angeles and in our country. It gives a much more powerful understanding of what was going on with that O.J. story.
Storytelling is, I mean, there's still, I mean, I think if anything has shown through in these films, it's the power of storytelling. And that even in the short attention span theater life that we live in right now, that you can still get people to sit down for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and watch a great story, right? I mean, I think it's reinforced that a great story still resonates with people, right?
It's something that our president, John Skipper, understood so well when he moved first in his senior content position and now, of course, the president of the company, is that John understood that maybe people are saying, you know, short attention spans, people don't want long-form content anymore. John didn't believe that for a second. We didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. Connor Schell didn't believe it. Bill Simmons didn't believe it. If you give them something engaging, engrossing, people will want to consume it. And I think that's either for the written piece that we've seen, you know, some superb long-form work on ESPN's platforms, written platforms, whether it was before Grantland, it was ESPN.com, OTA, all the written pieces that are in-depth. People do want to read these pieces. And, you know, Connor would say this, Connor Schell, who runs our entire division at ESPN Films, would say early on in 30 for 30, we don't want, you know, documentaries to be medicine. You know, it's not something we're force-feeding you here. This is good for you. You know, it's supposed to be engaging, entertaining, and informative at the same time, and that's what we've been shooting for from the start. So we started ESPN Films in early 2008 at a time where people were saying long-form content was dying, and I think we've shown exactly the opposite. If you produce it in a way that makes it important to the audience, then it'll work.
So as we conclude here, I mean, the basic elements of storytelling. What are you looking for when you get a pitch? And I'm sure you get hundreds of pitches during a year, and you pick, I don't know how many films you're doing, 6, 7 a year right now. What kind of stories? What's the basic element that's going to make a story successful for this franchise? It's
got a focus. It's got a specific focus. It's not a survey. We really look to avoid the survey kind of story. And that was a real guiding principle when we started 30 for 30 in the first place. We had about 150 pitches by the end of 30 for 30 Volume 1. And of which we rejected like 130. And most of the time, it was a pretty easy rejection in that it would, you know, not necessarily it's not important or compelling in some way, but it was too broad stroke, or it just didn't have the qualities of what we were looking for, that specific story, touching larger themes, transcending sports. We knew what we wanted. I think if you know what you want and you stay consistent with it, it can really work beautifully for you. And I think that's what we're doing here still to this day. It's the same principle that we started 30 for 30 back, you know, almost a decade ago, which was these specific stories that are not just sports stories, but go deeper, and it really has a cultural connection in some way. That's what we're looking for, and something that we think ultimately will have a broader appeal. But we're not always looking to do just mass appeal stories. You've got to mix it up. Again, a diverse range of the types of stories you're telling, I think, is really essential to the ongoing life of 30 for 30.
Congratulations. It's got to be thrilling. I mean, I think, you know, ESPN has many things to many people, but I think everyone agrees that some of the best stuff that comes, if not the best stuff that comes out of ESPN, or the 30 for 30 films.
Well, that's humbling and really rewarding to hear that and to sense how people have felt about 30 for 30, because it was a project that was started where the title framed what the films would be, right? 30 stories, 30 years, 30 different directors. And now, fortunately for us, it's gone in reverse, where now the films feed the title. And that's what happened after Volume 1 and why we decided to do a Volume 2 and now a Volume 3 and so on, was because people just started calling every documentary we did a 30 for 30. Mm-hmm. So 30 for 30 took on this greater meaning beyond the original meaning. That the original meaning is has kind of been put to rest, and now it's the other way around. The films represent, fortunately for us, a certain level of quality and a type of and a way of telling a story that gives 30 for 30 its meaning.
Really good. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Ed.
Appreciate it.
Sure.